and get onto an international call and people like, are you in Tokyo? I'm like, yeah, I'm in Tokyo.
Okay, let's get started. I think people will join as we go along. So good morning, folks, and welcome to this.
An international call and people like,
yeah, if everyone could please mute. Yeah. So good morning, folks. Welcome to this AMA session organized by NASSCOM DeepTech Club in partnership with, our sister programs at NASSCOM, the Emerge 50 Awards, and also the NASSCOM 10,000 Startup Program. We're really delighted to host none other than Vani Kola this morning. And Vani is the founder and managing director of Kalari Capital. And thank you, Vani, for taking time from, I'm sure, what's a busy Thursday morning, as you were saying, to speak to a NASSCOM ecosystem here. Welcome.
Glad to be here, Atul. I'm very proud of how you have evolved this club, how NPC has evolved, and the smallest thing we can do is to be part of this, but very proud of what all of you have done together in setting up this DeepTech Club and also encouraging our startup ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Vani. Yeah, if you could kindly mute as you're joining. Yeah. If everyone could mute, please. Yeah. Nihal, if you could do the honors of just force muting people.
Yeah.
So folks, we often are privileged to host some, I would say, very famous folks from our industry in these AMAs that don't need an introduction, and Vani would certainly be at top of that list. But I want to say, Vani's been one of the earliest supporters of India product and startup, being a multiple time entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. Vani moved back when she saw the opportunity to pay it forward to her country, and before our ecosystem actually got formalized, right? And on a personal note, I remember visiting you, Vani. I always tell you the story about 11 years back when I was looking to relocate from the Bay Area, and yes. I was doing a scouting trip, and I asked for your advice, and I still remember your first words to me were, "Well, have you had lunch?" so that shows the care that Vani has for all of us. And obviously over time Vani's backed some of our top entrepreneurs and startups, explosive growth stories, Dream 11, Myntra, CureFit, Snapdeal, we could go on and on. And what's really interesting is now Vani is also a yoga and a fitness guru, a wellness guru, and a positivity coach, I would say. I'm sure all of you read her post daily. She's one of the top influencers on LinkedIn and Twitter. And lastly, I want to say Vani's been a great supporter of NASSCOM, for well over a decade, and she's at NPC every year without fail and just shows up and says, where can I, add value, right? So it's a real pleasure. So I think we have a great audience. We'll have people joining in. A couple of ground rules. We are broadcasting live on YouTube, so please mute yourself unless you're speaking. We'll make this very interactive, right, and conversational. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll call upon you. And I would request you just state your name, your company, and ask the question concisely, right? So we can get many questions in. And just think about asking questions that could be value to a larger audience. Anything more one-on-one to do with your situation and in terms of how you could work with Kalari. If it's not generic enough, you can send me an email and I'll aggregate and I'll send it to Vani and her team, right? So with that, Vani, maybe I'll tee it up. We were talking about the club, right? It's been 4 years in the making, and every time we make some noise about Deep Tech India, we get both kinds of feedback. Caution that, hey, don't celebrate. We've not done much, right? But at the same time, we all agree it's important to nurture and encourage our growing ecosystem. So Vani, firstly, your views on the importance of deep tech and how India is doing today, and sort of the potential. That would be a great start.
Look, I'm an engineer by training, so I would, and I honestly don't think of myself as an investor, though I know that's my profession, but I do it because I really love engaging with new ideas, new products. And in fact, Kalari tends to be a product first kind of a investor. So, I tell founders when they're pitching, tell me what is it that you're working on? What are you passionate about? I don't need to know that it could be a $20 billion market. That doesn't help me at all to decide to to invest. So I'm someone who really believes that technology not only, of course, improves everybody's lives. I mean, if we go back to Industrial Revolution 1.0 to now 4.0, right? And we can see how much it has changed. But more importantly, it's a great equalizer, and it has been a great social equalizer. I'm reminiscing here, but from the biggest invention of all time was the Gutenberg printing press, which made literacy possible for everyone, right? And then internet, of course, made information access possible more easily. So, and if you go back to how much technology has transformed, society and human potential, I'm a big proponent that how do you make that inclusive? How do you make that accessible? And India is a great test bed for that, right? So here it's not just about technology, but it has to be also inclusive technology, which is affordable technology. And so that itself can be innovation. And I think that is the hope for the sort of remaining 5 billion people in the world, right? So you can, if you take out the advanced countries, then we have to make technology accessible and in a way that's inclusive. Or in the end, what is the purpose of technology? It has to be about making a difference to our collective well-being, right? So now, I'm very proud, like I said, of what you guys are doing, because this is essential. I think if India led the information technology wave out of, we all know the history on that and why and what happened. In many ways, all of us are the beneficiaries of that, right? So whenever there is even what may appear at that time to be a very small innovation and a small opportunity, I think it has, ripple effects far reaching. And if India could create great IP oriented, technology oriented companies that then, do create a global impact. And we shouldn't think global, even in our mind, often when entrepreneurs talk, they say we want to go global. And what they mean is I want to sell in US. Okay. And that's a great opportunity, but there is a broader world also, not that you should or should not sell to US. But I think there is a opportunity for India to lead that, because that's also our core strength. Technology and services are our core strength. Manufacturing has not been. And so in these areas, if we can lead, then I think in the next 2-3 decades, much like IT services did, we would spawn, not only the economic progress, but also, many other in industries and leadership to emerge. So I'm enthusiast, both about the purpose and the opportunity, right? Where I think, Atul, it's a problem is, people mistake that there isn't funding available. And, funding has to be thought from different links in the chain. If you look at why US does such a good job of this, enterprises set aside 10 to 15% in R&D, right? Large enterprises. So you have a Xerox, out of which spawned how many companies, Apple, Adobe, whatever, out of the Xerox research, IBM research, right? So large corporates have big budgets just set aside for research. Some of it benefits them. Some of it creates broader benefit, right? Indian enterprises don't have anywhere close to that from, research budgets. You go to universities, it's the same thing. You go to government funding, because there is a science before it becomes product, right? And investors can't invest into science just because of the nature of, we can take a moral stand one way or the other, but if we understand, they can take a science that can become a product and take a risk on that, and the product to market, they can take a risk. But there is an underlying need to create higher investment into science itself. And all of these metrics, enterprise research dollars, government like NSF, and all of those programs that create grants and so forth, that create the science. Nothing was born. I mean, even Google wasn't born without significant amount of research that went before, and then they're productizing that, right? So we forget how much went into research before something could be productized. That's missing. And then, of course, the sort of ability to capitalize on these products from monetization. All of this needs to come together for us to truly succeed. But one hope and silver lining I have is the fact that today, more than ever before, the world is a small place, right? So you should be able to draw science from somewhere else, or you can create it here for lower cost right now, the democratization of even research. So I also think that there is much more cross geography leverage that is happening. So with all of that, I'm definitely a supporter, proponent, hopeful, optimist that we can create great tech IP companies out of here.
Okay, well, that's a great analysis, and it's a very balanced analysis, Vani. On the, and you rightly said, so creating the science and then building sort of the applications on top of it. So I think both are, kind of problem statements, right? On the building applications on top, Vani, once, and this is a typical question that comes up in the club, once we do have a product in mind, and one of our entrepreneurs is building on top of either existing science, or they helping evolve the science and then building the application on top. How do they solve for this patient risk capital issue around, even though you have a product, then you need to look at long-term R&D cycles, right? And you talked about the R&D spend in the Western world. So how do they think about that, and how do they think about that in terms of investors like yourselves?
See, we always speak from our side of table, right? So I'm aware of that bias that I might be subjected to. I would gladly invest in high-risk IP-based companies. The challenge there is, I'll just put it out there. Oftentimes, it is really, really not so innovative. It is incremental innovation. If it is incremental innovation versus disruptive innovation, right, then it has to get to market much faster, and it has to get to monetization much faster, because your opportunity moat is execution and not really the innovation, right? So if you look at Oculus, right? They didn't have any revenue. Facebook bought them, or Next, or whatever, right? So if you can create truly disruptive innovation, or even Andy Bechtolsheim, he sold 2 or 3 companies for billions of dollars before it ever, and you would know that history, Atul, because you were in the Valley at that time, right? And it had never any revenue, but he built a famous compiler, or look at GitHub, sold to whatever, $20 billion to Microsoft, right? So I think you have to say, what is the disruptive innovation? So pardon me if I'm sort of, sitting on my high horse, so to speak, but I feel patient capital exists, but, not for incremental disruption. In which case, like I said, if I look at a social commerce space, let's say, I'm not saying they haven't any disruption, but the one who can raise the maximum capital the soonest and really execute and capture market share, that's kind of the movement, right? For that, that's different. To me, I think if we are talking here, it needs to be on fundamental innovation. Then I do believe there are enough takers. There are at least 5-6 funds with partners who have the background to be able to be open to those kind of investments and consider it.
Okay, that's great advice. And after the session, Vani, I'll get the list of those 5-6 funds in case it's not very clear to everyone. It'll be worth publishing it. With that,
we can close with that. I'm happy to say, from my perspective, who are the investors that are funding, or will be fund, or could be funding.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So with that, folks, let's open it up. Just raise your hand or just go for it. We have a smaller group here. We have a lot of people on YouTube. So please do ask your question and just state your name and your company and go for it.
It's always like in the school, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
first one gets a donut. So maybe I'll keep another warmer. So Vani, on what are your views on the domestic market for deep tech? And just some background. I mean, in the club, obviously, like you said, everyone is looking at the US and some of the measurement. I've done in my company, right? I mean, the US market is 10x SARC, not only India. So I mean, we know the price points here for B2B and all of that, and early adopter culture is not there, but we need to seed it. So how do we create an early adopter culture? I think it probably goes back to some of the disruptive stuff, but how do you go to a large corporate in India and help them understand that this is critical for them? They need to do the experimentation. It's not about getting free POCs or getting a canned product that will work on day one necessarily, right? So how do we unlock India?
Atul, I did enterprise sales for a long time while in US. The best way is, first of all, don't do free POCs, please. Okay, don't do anything free. That's always my rule. If somebody doesn't value your product, and it's not even free POCs these days. I mean, I just saw a company yesterday who comes and says, seemed like a reasonable product in the 1 hour call I could have, but their first customer, don't ask me why, the company says they've given them 40% ownership. I said, for what? Would they be sitting in your company with a 40% on the cap table, let alone 4% or 0.4%? They're a customer, for God's sake. He said, no, they negotiated that and they will be a reference and they will, take it to other customers and all of that. So, and I empathize with it because you feel desperate as an entrepreneur to just make progress. And I have been there in my own days of building software companies. But I think one rule, fortunately, that I was clear in my mind, which in hindsight, I know really helped me, is I said, if the customer doesn't believe enough in the value and pay me something, that's my self-respect as an entrepreneur and my product, and I will not give anything for free. Then either I don't have a good enough product or I'm barking up to the wrong customers, okay? The second is, don't create structures that will crush you in the long term, even if in the short term you feel like you are making progress. There's just no point, right? So having a customer as a large, shareholder, that too without putting commensurate significant capital. Strategics have to put more capital than financials to get your equity. Your equity is gold, and don't give it away cheaply like that, So you didn't ask me for that advice, but I will put that out because I see that happening, and don't, because I don't see how I would invest in a company like that with a customer sitting with some 40% ownership in the cap table, but how do you solve for this? And at this group level, Atul, setting up the right CIO club, and how should I say, competition. You only need a couple of CIOs who are willing to be pioneers, and you need those pioneers and missionaries. I remember for years, Pete Solvik was the CIO at Cisco, and he would just encourage every startup, if they could deliver, and they paid reasonably, right? And if you did deliver, they were willing to publish the ROI. And the way they saw it is, we are going to lead our company through these young companies bringing innovation. They were the first to adopt CRM systems when CRM was just happening, which sounds like strange right now that everybody uses a CRM, but they were the first to adopt civil systems. They were the first to adopt whatever, right? So, and they would, I remember this paper because I was working in CRM at that time. Cisco was, before anybody had heard of it, first to adopt Remedy, which nobody even remembers what that CRM solution was today. But they published that their call center costs went down by 70% by using CRM after they worked on this for 18 months. And guess what? When a CIO does that, then every other CIO or their boards are asking, well, what is this? Why are we not doing, right? So we need to find those pioneer missionary CIOs, and we have to hope they exist in Indian enterprise. I haven't done enterprise sales in India for a long time, so I don't know who they are, but they must exist. If they don't, I think we have a role here at NASSCOM to create that CIO club of pioneers who are willing to, give this a chance and show that their businesses have been progressive, early beneficiaries of it, and that's part of their brand of their company, reputation of their company. And why, and it is not just charity that they're doing, because today if you're ahead in technology, and every industry has to be worried right now to say, where will my competition come from? How do I make progress? Blah 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 blah. So maybe at the NASSCOM level, Atul, we can do more from creating that CIO group, and making that possible for all startups.
Yeah, no, well said, Vani. And I'm sure when you say CIO, you mean business CXOs. As you know, the money's moved to business roles. So and that's what we've been doing. I think through NPC now we have a very large community of business leaders who are getting involved. And I completely agree with you. Vani, in terms of, what are your thoughts on investment and M&A from Indian businesses? As we know, like Reliance has done a couple, including from the club. In fact, of the 78 club companies previously, I think 3 or 4 got acquired, but we're not seeing enough. And it's back to, I think, the whole mindset of experimentation and corporate innovation is missing. But do you see that picking up in the next couple of years?
See, M&A will definitely pick up. There is no question about it. Look at the new acquisitions that if I rank just top 3 acquirers today, Reliance, Tata, Amazon, they're all acquiring, right? Now, the question, of course, is, when do you want to be acquired? I think we need to turn the clock that way, or the question that way, right? And the decision to be acquired or not always rests with the founder, and that's something that founders need to be far more educated and calibrated about. When do they sell the company, and why are they selling the company? So I think M&A in India will continue to grow. And in fact, we had only seen, what should I say, small M&As, right? Whether it's Flipkart, whether it's, any of the large players who could acquire, we had only seen small M&As. But my belief is we will also see some very large M&As happen, because consolidation is natural. I think founders also have progressed on this from understanding when and when not to sell. So M&A will happen. That is different, though, than your question of strategic investment.
Yes, right.
Strategic investment is always double-edged sword. Whether it's here, US, we have seen this all the way. Of course, as long as somebody is a minority strategic investor, it's okay. Majority strategic investor becomes a bit challenging, as you're well aware. We can talk about the do's and don'ts, pros and cons on that. So I'm a little weary. M&A, it's clean, so it's over and done with, right? So at least from shareholding perspective or external shareholders perspective, I don't mean from a founder perspective. You have to continue to build, of course, even with an M&A. But from corporate investments, you have to be very, very careful what you're signing up for. Oftentimes I see it, other than a few exceptions, see it go south, then succeed.
Got it. And we have a related question from Rajesh Manpat. Rajesh, go for it. If you could just state your company as well and ask the question, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm a founder of iFuture Robotics. So I had a question related to a strategic investor customer who wants to buy a majority stake. What are the key terms a founder should negotiate, considering future investments become a less attractive proposition for investors?
if I was your personal advisor, Rajesh, first thing I would ask you to negotiate is how does the rest of the 49% exit? That's you and your co-founders and your ESOP holders and maybe some angel investors. So because the strategic has 51%, now you're locked in with them for all approvals. As you already said, traditional investors, not that they'll shy away, as long as there is clarity on the strategic's intent and alignment, which is usually the problem, they will not necessarily shy away if that is very clear. And if the company is on a strong growth path, and if, for example, the strategic said, look, we want to take the company public, and there was trust and confidence that that's really the path, then that would be okay. The challenge is when you have a strategic who you brought in because you are compelled to, forced to, because that appears to be the only option available, and you don't know how the rest of the company can exit, right? So you're kind of locked in to locked in without, either the ability to pivot and control the future of the company, nor ability to move on, right? So that is really the nuance here. As long as what the strategic and you are, for example, I'll without taking a name, one of our companies recently brought a very large international conglomerate, and they own, I think, 60% or whatever, and the shareholders and the founders, which we are part of, own the rest. But they were very, very clear that what they wanted to do was help take this company public. Okay, now they may change their mind, who knows, but there are enough clauses there where investors and founders also have veto to bring in additional capital if they can. The strategic cannot unilaterally dictate everything, which usually strategics won't agree, and that's again where you run into a problem. If there can be a board that is can function as a truly objective and independent board, and if the goal of where the company is next 2-year plan is very, very aligned, then I think it's okay. And if those two don't exist, then I think it's very important to say what is a committed exit plan. It could be we got 51% and the rest of the 49 we purchase on a revenue conversion model like this in 2 years from now or whatever, and we call it a put option. As long as you can have a put option on them, then it's okay. I hope I answered your question, Rajesh.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next we have a question from Anubhav. Kumar Anubhav, please go ahead. Kumar, are you there? Okay, I can ask the question. Vani, Kumar is the founder of Not On Map. He would like to know what's your take on innovation in the travel industry. And though it's been hit hardest, do you think it'll bounce back? And it's funny we're asking that with the pandemic now coming back. Are you bullish on this industry sort of long term as well?
Cautiously. Yeah. I think, let me put it this way. When an industry goes through the kind of disruption that it did, right? It's a great story for entrepreneurs and not so for the incumbents. I mean, look at what has happened. Cathay Pacific, decimated, great airline, right? Completely decimated. And so many, existing, when it goes through, it's kind of like this, when you have a forest fire and the beautiful old trees all die, then you feel very sad, but then that's the only way new trees grow, right? And you see the resurgence that happens, right? And it's this kind of a calamity is like that. So there's no question in my mind that something fundamentally different from a travel industry will and has to emerge. It could be many things, how, asset management works and, dividing that risk into many things, or, how you create very different kind of customer experiences, though it's kind of just fun to talk about, a flight to nowhere we have seen happen, or, whatever, right? So who would have thought a year ago, anybody, anywhere in the world would just get on a plane that goes nowhere and pay money for it, So, I mean, so whatever different experiences, maybe more AR, VR will happen. So from, travel experiences, how do we experience museum digitally without having to physically go there, which maybe opens, very different vistas for people. So travel, will leverage technology, and travel typically, as we understand it, will have to fundamentally change, which is always great for entrepreneurs. When there's great disruption, rarely do incumbents can leverage the future. What exactly is that? I don't know. Hopefully, when a founder comes to us with it, we can recognize it and fund it, because this is one industry where there is such a black swan. What comes as a after, people will pay. People want experiences. People will want to, travel. But what does that all mean from new kind of products that you can create? That's for the entrepreneurs to imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even today, in the last 6 months, if I look at business plans I've gotten in the travel, they're a little bit more of what was before. What was before is not going to work, right? That at least is, I'm very clear.
Yeah.
What next? That I have not yet seen much of, right? It's really, curated, COVID safe homestays or whatever, but it's really more of the same. But I think it has to be something fundamentally reimagined differently at many levels, right? How people consume content, how, they experience something before they go there, or, there's so many ways this is for sure going to change.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and it's back to what you said, incremental versus true disruptive. And Vani, recently we all agreed that the pandemic was the Y2K moment for our deep tech ecosystem. So that makes sense. Other questions? If you could turn on your video as well and briefly.
We have Amit who's raised a hand.
Okay. Yeah. Amit, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amit Sukheja. I'm the founder and CEO of Zest IoT. Interestingly, we built a product for aviation, and we were doing pretty well, won multiple awards. But since pandemic, we took a lot of that technology, and now we have built product for, let's say, manufacturing and let's say a couple of other industries, and got traction and of course paid customers and contracts. So from a growth capital perspective, how, let's say, relevant and easy or difficult it is for startups with products into multiple industry, making revenues to attract growth capital? And is it a good or a bad strategy?
I mean, there is no such thing as absolute good or absolute bad strategy. Good strategy is a strategy that works and proves that it was brilliant, right? And that's also a thin edge. What is brilliant and what is stupid is also a very thin line to cross. Remember that, right? So first of all, survival is always a good strategy, right? You have to survive today to be able to have a chance to experience tomorrow. So you've done the right things in the pandemic to do that, whatever choices you had to make, pivots, that's good strategy to begin with. In growth, I think the key is not whether you're in multiple industries or not, but whether you can leverage anything in common. Suppose these 2 industries or 3 industries or 10 industries that you are going to chase have nothing in common, neither the product, nor the customer, nor the pricing. Everything is different. Then you're running 3 companies or 10 companies. That's very hard from a focus. That is a problem, right? From a growth capital perspective. But suppose you have, I don't know what your product is, but suppose you are a DocuSign, okay? I mean, you may attack one industry just from saturation, but it's a largely horizontal product, right? And all customers have similar need regardless of the industry. But suppose you have shop floor management for, discrete manufacturing. That doesn't work for continuous manufacturing, which is completely different process, right? What works for a paper industry, shop floor management, does not work for a chemical industry, let's say, shop floor management, because the fundamental manufacturing processes are different. So now if you came to me and said, I'm going to do all kinds of shop floor management, I'm just making this up, right? That is not as attractive from growth. You can do that after you do one and, similar processes, you get all the industries in that, then you go to next and next and next. But if you do 10 different versions of the product, capital is just simply not available. If you, for growth, if you said, I'm doing a sandbox experiment, I'm trying 3-4 different industries, I'm raising a seed capital, one of these industries will click, maybe it's okay. But it's amount of capital and how diffused you are from, doing similar things versus very diverse things. I think that's the challenge, often. If I see a business plan that is both B2B and B2C, and I've seen these many times, and if I say to the entrepreneur, pick one, I don't really care which one you pick whichever one you choose that you are most interested in. They affirm, and they're very firm that they could execute to both and they can succeed. So far in my entire experience, I've never seen that. That's not to say you could be Google starting as a B2C, you could build a B2B, right? Which Google Enterprise does. You could be Amazon with B2C, you could build AWS, which is largely B2B, but that doesn't happen. And so then this is the example that comes, so Amazon does it. Well, Amazon did it after 20 years. They were a public company by the time AWS came around, right? So that doesn't count, right? That's like saying General Electric has, or Tata Corporation has, tea and tobacco and hotel and steel and whatever else, right? But that's different. You can't bring that example. For you, today, where you are, you have to show how your growth dollars amplify. One gets you 10, right? $1 invested gets you 10. If you're too diffused, that's the concern. Not that you're in two different industries. As long as there is something fundamental and common between those, from a product or a sales process or something, that's okay.
Understood. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Sehaj, go ahead. You raised your hand.
Sure. Hey, hi Atul. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Kindly excuse my camera. So, Vani, I have a specific question for you. How to balance the horizontal versus specific with respect to deep tech? Because, obviously, every startup playbook says that, you have to be specific before going broad. But if we talk about, say, a deep tech technology, which can, impact a mammoth industry. So it's not really a stepwise, innovation. It's not an incremental innovation. It's a huge, humongous innovation. But you need to start at a specific point. And say if we start at a specific use case, to certain people, that innovation might not look that mammoth. For that specific use case, that innovation might, sound as incremental. But whereas the core underlying technology is so leapfrog innovative, but you have to start it somewhere, especially with the Indian ecosystem and trying to raise money. So any tips on being specific versus broad, specifically with respect to deep tech, and then at early stages for say getting the first 200K ARR?
Sehaj, you are very humble. If you could just state your company also, please.
Autogenerate.ai.
Yeah.
So if ma'am needs some context, I can provide that as well.
So let me try to answer your question. All technologies could potentially be horizontal. Now, unless you can sell your technology as a algorithm, let's say you have a great algo company and you're going to keep on generating algos that people use to embed into their product, then you don't need to be vertical, you can be horizontal. And there are other technologies that could be truly horizontal that way, because they are really about how should I say, black box, okay? And you can become embedded, and most embedded technologies are horizontal, right? Now, the vertical is, really you can't sell a horizontal technology. Nobody is going to buy it. They need an application on the technology, okay? Now, if you need an application on the technology, how would you do it? Now you can sell if there is a way why your technology is the best, then you can just be a developer tool and you sell the SDK only, and developers will, use your technology and they'll build the applications on top. Very hard to execute, but there are of course companies that have done that. Then you're a platform, and there also you are really, your customer is the developer who then goes and does whatever. Now you think you have a horizontal technology sometimes, but neither the developers are going to adopt, because you don't know how to get 2,000 developers to start developing on it, nor is it an embedded technology that people just put it into theirs and they pay you some small royalty out of each usage measure of some sort. You have to actually develop the application to prove your technology. Let's put it that way. Then you have to pick a vertical industry, because you cannot say I'll develop for 5 industries, which will be very hard. You have to show how this technology into some vertical industry shows the use case, and then maybe there is a chance for you to continue to develop this as a platform and license it for other industries and so forth. So if you can neither have developers building for you, nor you are truly an embedded technology, then you have to pick the best vertical that you can. Maybe you don't know what is that best vertical. I'll give you an example. In fact, my first company was a cataloging engine we developed. Okay, we said, oh, e-commerce is blah 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 blah, and cataloging engine will be needed. And then it turned out that we really could not sell a cataloging engine for whatever reasons. I won't go into details. So we said, okay, now we are not able to sell just this as an engine. Then what is the application we can build? And that's when we went into B2B procurement, blah blah blah, and it did well. So that took us a year, 2 years to figure out that we couldn't sell our platform technology, and we had to become an application. Which application shall we then become? So these are evolutions to all startups. But this notion is always, I'm not saying no one has a platform technology. Of course, many people have great platform technology, but there's also many times a illusion that what you really have is a true platform technology. And even if you do, it's of no use if you can't take it to market. So let me take an example. Today, all of us use GPS in one way or the other, right? I mean, how many times do you turn on your Google Maps or send your location from WhatsApp or whatever. But the true, really early GPS, which you could call it a platform technology, was sort of in the 1970s that emerged with first prototypes that were built. And then there were some early companies that started selling GPS technology, and they couldn't really find a use case for it, and you can imagine, because I mean, there's a certain large adoption before use cases can emerge. So what they did after almost I would say 5-6 years of struggling with GPS technology was they created a device to simply go into rental car companies that they could then, of course, in US, rental car companies are self-driven. So here we have a built-in GPS with maybe if you get a rental car, there's a driver, but nonetheless, okay. And it was, I remember early on, $15-20 a day. So that would be shared between the rental company and the GPS company. That was really the first commercial use, though they tried many things, nothing worked. OEMs, auto industry was simply not interested because, customers were not asking, why would they put it on? Now, because I was in sales, I remember I would pay, you go to a new city, you get a car and none of you even know what I'm talking about, because we would take out a map. We would have gotten it from AAA or something, A, H, something on x-axis, 1 to 10 on y-axis. You have to put the coordinate and you have to map out your coordinates with a physical map to drive if you go to a new city, right? And, like I said, very few people are probably left from my vintage who have done actually map reading and coordinate driving that way, right? So now the thing is, so would I be willing to pay $20 in that situation in a new city? But I could not have imagined that I would just turn on GPS to go from home to my office, let us say, just to find an alternate route in traffic. That use case would have never occurred at that time, right? Because a lot of things had to happen for that to happen. So that was when they commercialized, right? Out of that spun Garmin and all these guys who then you started buying as a customer. You said, oh, this is pretty cool, but I'll buy my own. Why am I paying $25 every time when I could buy this for $500, which was the early GPS devices, and you said, if I use it 25 times, then it'll be useful to me. So let me buy that. Then the OEM started putting GPS into the car, and of course now it's on our phone. And so there is a progression. If you see from 73, for it to truly become a platform technology, right? And Google Maps came in the 90s, right? So there is a 2 decades before it actually became. In that situation, you may think you have a platform technology, but you really have to create vertical apps for people to experience your platform technology, you know?
Yeah. So Vani, you reminded me of going to AAA to get the maps. Yeah. So Vani, you know, this whole topic of horizontal, vertical, platform versus point application gets discussed almost every day in the club. And I know Sabu has a counterpoint. Sabu, go ahead.
Hi. You'll have to pardon me. I speak my mind sometimes.
Yeah, please, all the time. Speak your mind. I do too.
I am both an architect of the real world kind and also of a software developer. Unusually, I wrote a design software for my architectural practice. I was the architect for Konkan Railway for many of their works. And when I see this kind of thing, I always like to look at the contrapoint. So let me give you one kind of a little bit of a ironical point of view. Let's say 1992 or 93, I come up with an idea and I tell people, you know what? I've invented a phone. You can talk on the road. And somebody will say, why should I talk on the road? No. You can even talk in the local train to your wife. I said, oh, you're crazy. Like, I will talk to my wife in the local train. Like, so, I mean, the point which I'm trying to say here is that a lot of things which are highly valuable for society, they were actually quite disruptive, you know. So people try to flap their wings and they didn't fly. And the moment they thought about the exact opposite of having a fixed wing, that's when they actually flew. They thought that, you know, you need oxygen and the presence of oxygen to have light in the night. And when you did not have oxygen is when you actually got light in the night. So a lot of things which really come up in the world are very horizontal, and it requires a lot of contra thinking and a contra point of view. If an architect made the same building again and again, he's out of business completely. There is no way he's going to really get his next project. If Konkan Railway did not do whatever they had to do in a very unusual way, when Lime, the chief engineer at Konkan Railway, I was one of the first guys with Konkan Railway. I was like the ex officio member of Konkan Railway. They were like the dirty dozen, and the kind of things which they did were extremely horizontal and very technically difficult. So don't conflate the two things. If you have to really achieve very high profits, you really need to go into business to businesses, which can cover a lot of business. Now the thing is, I agree that it is difficult to achieve there. It is not everybody's cup of tea. That is a separate question. It need not be conflated with the fact that businesses are there. You know, one of the I work in all kinds of different IT situations nowadays. I did fair amount of work. One of the first wiki system is mine. I've seen both the sides of the story. When you do highly specialized vertical thing, and if it is disruptive, it scares the shit out of people. Okay, so that itself will prevent people from adopting it. So if you want to reduce the risk of your existence as a business, it is quite imperative that you need to check the foundation. Just like a building will not have one foundation on which the building will stand. Pardon my architecture analogies, but they actually make a lot of sense. Similarly, you cannot, and you know, it's really really odd, you know, when I talk to angel investors and they say, you know, you should be focused, you should do this. I said, are you focused in giving all your money to me only? You are not, right? You are spreading your risk. You're making sure that you take your corpus of funds which you have and then you give it to different people. Why do you do that? Because you want to spread your risk. Same is the case with this, with entrepreneurs. So you need to spread your risk. Of course, if you do it too wide, then you're gone haywire.
Yeah. Fair enough, Sabu. Fair enough. Vani? Any feedback, Vani?
No. I mean, I agree. I think there is a disagreement. I think I appreciate the background and the decades of experience and live example. I was a listener. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good. Well said, Sabu. So it's a difficult balance, right? And the context is the key there,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, Narendra, over to you.
So, Vani, one question on the earlier point you made about the research ecosystem. I mean, many of us in the Valley, when we almost sort of grew up, we saw the linkages between Stanford and the billions and billions of value it ended up creating. Specific question is, and in India, I was thinking of one example. For example, Unifor. There could be many more, right? This was a company I had met long ago with Junjunwala in Chennai. Now they're up to Series D, if I recall correctly. In your experience, do you see a lot of those coming to you as proposals or even as pipeline? Do you see examples of that academia and the business brain coming together to create, potential reason for you to invest in it? A, and then B is, what could we and DTC and others could do more, and maybe even the government, to really get that to happen? If we believe that is one of the mechanisms by which this sort of tech and business is going to grow together.
Sadly, Narendra, I don't see that many come together. So fortunately, the number is not zero, but it's not like dozens, let's put it that way, let alone hundreds, right? So because I also think, there may be class projects, right? But the commitment to really build them into companies, businesses, nurtured over a time, I don't really see that as much, right? If I say in the last 2 years, I would have probably seen 2-3 such examples, right? So that's quite fewer number to choose from being able to actually invest, right? It whether we saw it or not, it needs to be like in 200, not 24 even, right? What could we do more? Look, I mean, first of all, none of us could have imagined how much a decade ago, 2006, when I came here, how much influence, impact, NASSCOM and NPC can have. In 95, I remember TIE itself started, and that catapulted many Indus entrepreneurs, and it has created a different trickle effect. I was a recipient of support and help from there, right? Early on in the mid-90s. And so I think, when there is right intent, it takes time though, it doesn't happen overnight. These are sort of, you can look back in a decade like we are with NASSCOM and we say, what did we really achieve? And you can see that from that horizon of time, and you need people who are willing to build these programs, build these institutions. And in order to do that, the power and success of the institution has to be also your payoff, because you can't have multiple agendas, right? It's not going to be easy for a VC to build it because they do have a certain focus and an agenda. They can support, they can enable, they can even subscribe, whatever. So, but it does need, Narendra, people like you, Atul, all the others that are doing these kind of things, to someone to pick up that mantle, right, for it to happen. So I don't think there is enough, there are entrepreneurship competitions, right, that happen almost on all the campuses now, right? There's no question about it. But what doesn't happen is seriousness to build those companies out of that, right? So which is fine. It is, like a learning and a class project style, that's all right, right? But if you want serious companies coming out of it, then I think we have to create programmatically, Sign has tried to do that at IITB, and, there are other ones also. But more of that, I think, needs to happen, that takes academia and not just, but even at some of these campus things, they're only student run, right? Which is okay. It gives them experience, exposure, inspiration, that's all fine. But through academia, research, guided companies getting built. You see with MIT labs, for example, right? Every year, dozens of companies get rolled out of there. So we need that kind of incubation lab structure in campuses to spawn out.
Yep. Well said.
Clearly, there's work to do. On a very lighter note, Vani, it's Thursday and we haven't announced the unicorn yet. So are we going to do it before? We've seen 3 this week.
Yeah, I think, but then there's somehow this, I'm getting bugged by this word unicorn, okay? And by the media flash on that. And I hope, also entrepreneurs don't really look at that as the end all be all. Yes, unicorn is nice. It's like to me, doing well in your high school, okay? Fine. There is rest of the life on what else are you going to do. And there's this obsession about unicorn, which is okay. I mean, good to be a unicorn. I don't want to take away from the unicorns, but I would rather the conversation is about, when they announce a unicorn, for example, no one says this is how much profit they are making, or this is how many customers they've served, or this is how much value they have created. Why not, right? I mean, shouldn't that be, unicorn is an outcome out of all of this, but there's hardly any spotlight on that. That's really my pet peeve, if you will, to vent on my soapbox. But I would like to see.
We can do our bit to amplify that. So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we could do our bit to amplify that.
Yeah, so I would love to see companies talk first around not their funding and valuation, which is a measure based on markets and so on and so forth. And, it is not a guarantee that a unicorn company will continue to succeed and get to the next level, right? And because of the focus, sometimes I worry if that is the holy grail and that's what you should choose. And obviously we know that that's not what you should choose. So I would rather we speak in terms of, we saw these great products that emerged. We saw them rapidly get to X number of customers. We saw them, do X number of mammograms, whatever, this thinking Miramai or whatever. So, there's lots of, what is the benefit and who is the beneficiary? If we can put that spotlight as an award, that would be great.
Yeah, well said, Vani. You have echoed what we discuss in the club very often. So thank you for coming out with that. I know we are out of time. Can we go about 5 minutes? Vani, are you good with that? Okay. Yeah. So Vani, a question very often comes about the US market, and you touched upon that. And let's take a scenario. A lot of our companies are actually selling in the US. They're very successful. In fact, there are several where majority of the revenue is the US and Europe and so on outside India. But, large majority of our companies have a couple of 100Ks of revenue in India. They're working with some very good clients. And now they're looking to, sort of start selling in the US. Any playbook from your mind? I know context would be very important there, but, overall, any sort of approach and philosophy to looking at the US and, how does a company risk spreading itself too thin between 2 markets also, which are very different? Digital laggard and early adopter, right? 2 different markets. And again, it depends on product space, etc. So any guidance there?
I think one good news is, if you're a SaaS company, especially, the world is really flat, so to speak, right? I'll talk about some technical issues first, Atul. The problem that I often see when I say technical, I mean technical from a company structure. Should you be US or India domiciled, right? Now, if your revenue is going to be largely India, and let's say you're a YC company, so without thinking, you're a Delaware company, but India is your revenue. I think those structures are going to struggle because US investors beyond a certain point, if India is your market, unless it's growth dollars, are not going to do early dollars. And in India, there is early dollars available in 2 buckets. One, which is India AIF, which will not invest into a US entity. And 2, global funds, which could invest into either entity. But regardless, while we said the world is flat, geographic governmental oversights are also getting more constrained, right? So if you're 100% India revenue company to be domiciled elsewhere, I know, there is a belief that that's better. I firmly believe it isn't. In fact, it can have you run into many problems. That's a whole different topic for a different platform. But it's very important to be aware of. And so they get caught into this where neither the US investors will invest because this is the India market, unless you get to the Tiger, SoftBank level of a company, nor 50% of the Indian investors will invest because they are AIFs and now cannot invest without significant RBI process, which will take a long time. So those are some, that's what I said about technical, but let's just leave that and talk more about market itself. Look, I mean, it's fine if US is your market. Oftentimes, it's a very different sales process. People underestimate what it takes to build a sales organization in US, and hence, the capital efficiency on that, they don't really understand. It's generally hard on a Series A kind of funding to focus on US unless you as a founder already have a deep experience in selling into US, right? So I see lots of mistakes that happen by underestimating. US may have higher ARPU and all of that, okay? But selling process there is also not cheap and it's quite difficult. The exception, of course, is, you don't need sales, marketing, anything, and you can, in US, you are all inside sales and you can put that in India, let us say. So a few SaaS companies could really do that. Zoho has done that and many others. So I think it depends on your sales and marketing strategy and, where you are from your life cycle as a company and the capital you have in order to, when you enter US and how you enter US. And, also one of the founders, if US is your primary market, one of the founders will have to be based there, and that's not always easy or possible, both from founder background and experience, let alone visas and other issues that today are real,
Thank you, Vani. I think you covered a lot of ground on that question, and it's a very important one. And with that last question, Vani, how do the club today, Vani, we had 78 entrepreneurs. Now I think we've added about 20, 25, right, Nehal? And so we'll go to about 100. Our goal in the next 5 years is to 1,000. So we're looking at scale. We're working through partnerships. We're raising sponsorship money. More than anything, the club concept, it's a collegial community for peer-to-peer learning. And so thanks to people like you, I think we're accelerating that learning. So Vani, last question, how do our 100 odd startups try and work with Kalari? What process should they work through?
Our emails are on our website. Mine is vani@kalari.com. I prefer email to a WhatsApp generally. And so send email. We have various people in the firm. There are 7 investment partners in the firm, and we have about 12 or so analysts that also look at proposals that come to us, and generally we answer. I know sometimes I get rapped that I sent you an email, you didn't answer, or I sent you a note on LinkedIn, you didn't answer. It's hard to reply on a LinkedIn or a DM or something like that to everyone. But if you send an email, we generally answer, okay? So I would say that send an email to me, send an email to Ravi. I know in the call, Avinash and others are also there. So it's, you can go to the website and click anybody whom you want to send to email. And we want to invest, right, into, India tech companies. So finding us is not that hard, Atul. And generally at Kalari, I think, from my days as an entrepreneur, I would have pitched to 100+ VCs. And over time, I realized that most of them weren't giving me honest answers. Now, it may be answers I like or not, right? but I want people to give me honest answers. That's who I am. And finally, the VCs that I respected, that I kept a relationship with, were those that honestly told me why they didn't want to invest. And generally, the answer you will get is something, when you make more progress, or when you get more customers, or, we are not clear about the market, or something, right? And I wanted to get honest feedback. Look, didn't understand your pitch, or don't know what your product does, or, just don't believe in this market, or whatever it was, right? And the few that took the time to tell me, they did me a great favor. That's how I saw it. So we do that all the time. Okay, now sometimes that may be welcome, sometimes that may be unwelcome. But I feel if you gave me your time, I need to respect you and tell you what I truly think, and not sort of give you some platitudes, right? So one thing you will get from Kalari, if you ask, sometimes I don't think you want to listen, so then it's okay, is what really did you not like? And we are pretty authentic about telling. That doesn't mean we are right. We could be wrong, okay? VC has a 50% probability of being wrong also in their assessment and judgment, but are they authentic to tell you what they think? And I value that in all my relationships. So that's what we embrace, even with entrepreneurs. We may be able to fund them, we may not be able to fund them. We may be limited in our understanding of their vision, but we want to be genuine and authentic and honest, because we really respect the journey of the entrepreneur. You put your life on hold. This encompasses your physical, emotional being, and you have a dream, and we are sensitive to that, to understand that.
Yeah. No, thank you, Vani. Thank you for being so authentic and transparent and sharing that. So I think we're well out of time. I think we covered some really good ground. We talked about science versus applications, and disruptive innovation versus incremental. And Vani, you mentioned that there is investment and opportunity there, and at least 5, 6 that you personally can vouch for. And then you mentioned, focus on problems, large scale problems to solve using deep tech. Unlock early adopters in India. We talked about that, and the need for role models. We talked about being very clear if you're a platform or an application. We had some good debate there, and the unicorn only culture. We talked about US and India, and how hard it is to drum up sales in the US, and the need for experience and all of that. So I think this was very valuable, Vani. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing your insights, and hopefully this will be a long association with the club and our Emerge 50 companies and our 10K companies. And thank you for being a strong partner and supporter of NASSCOM and the ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Atul, Narendra, and the entire team I know the genuine hard work you're putting to lift the ecosystem. I have a lot of #respect for that, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you for all our audience for tuning in and for your excellent questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thanks, Atul. Thanks, Vani.